Good morning, everyone. So, I am KB Anusha. So, I am from AML IoT department from VNR VJIT. So, today I am going to discuss database management system concepts which are related to database management systems. So, coming to introduction. So, what is a database? So, a database, it is a collection of interrelated data which is used to retrieve, insert, and delete the data efficiently. So, we can have multiple examples to represent the database. So, consider a college database which organizes the data, so which consists of different details about the admin, staff, students, and faculty, etc. So, which contains a interrelated or collection of different types of data, so where we can perform certain operations on the database. So coming to the database management system, what is DBMS? So it is a software which is used to manage the database. For example, so we are having multiple database management systems such as MySQL, Oracle, so PostgreSQL. So these are the different types of database management systems which are very popular. So which are different commercial databases which is used to for different applications in order to store different types of data, like consider a student information, or else a library management system, or else any type of details we can use this to store. By using this DBMS, which with the help of these softwares we are unable to store the data. So DBMS provides an interface to perform various operations. So we can perform certain operations like retrieval the data, we can perform deletion, creation, so updating the data in the database. So these are the different types of operations we can perform on the database. So coming to the database system applications. So these are the different types of applications we are having in the real world, like reservation system, where we can perform certain reservations, like train reservation systems, where we use these database to access. So library management system, where it contains the details about the library, student details, so book details, all this information are inbuilt stored in the database, so which comes under the library management system. Coming to the banking system, so this is where this database can be accessed using in banking system, where it contains customer details, bank details. So all these details, in order to store, in order to access the details, we need to use this database. So coming to this educational sector, in educational sector also we are going to use this database, like storing the student details, course details like fees, so all these details can be stored by using this database. So financial cards, where the details about the credit card and debit card details, all these information about the bank related cards are being used in the database. So coming to the social media sites, so this is one of the application of the database system, where we can see multiple comments, post, so different types of applications. So these are the real world applications where we are going to use the database in the real world. So coming to the advantages of DBMS over file systems, as we are having two types of file system and DBMS. So the file system, where we are going to store the data in the form of files. So it is one of the traditional way and oldest way in order to store the data in the form of files. So nowadays we are going to use these database instead of storing the files. Instead of maintaining multiple files, we are using database system, so that the accessing is easy. In order we can retrieve the data faster. So there are certain applications or certain advantages of using this database compared to file system. So this does not have any relations with other files. So also we call it as a flat file. So coming to this database system compared to file system, so it is a tool or it is a software which is used for creating and managing the data in the database. So in order to manage or in order to update, retrieval the data from the database, so here we are going to use this DBMS database management system, which allows you to access the data easily. So we can perform certain operations, we can access a particular data from the database. So while compared to file system or traditional system, it is difficult to retrieve the data, or if you want to retrieve any record from the database, it takes some time to retrieve the data. So when compared to DBMS, the accessing part is very easy compared to file system. So it can define our own data types with data with specific constraints. Here the constraints is a very important concept in database management system. In order to store or in order to retrieve any files, so these constraints are applicable for the database. So by using this, so the duplicate values can be removed from the database. So coming to the traditional file system, the duplicate copies or duplicate records it may contain. So in DBMS we can remove that the duplicate values or repeated values or repeated records from the database. So this is a pictorial representation of DBMS system and file system. So this is the structure of the database or database structure, and this is the structure of the file system, where multiple records or repeated records are stored in this. So coming to the features of DBMS, why we need to use this database management system, as these are the different features we are having. So first, coming to the data redundancy, data sharing, data concurrency, data searching, data security, data recovery, and data consistency. So as we are having multiple features compared to traditional file system, so we are going to use these DBMS. So first, coming to the data redundancy. So what is this data redundancy? Means removing unnecessary or removing the duplications of the same data. So where we are having a duplication, so this can be controlled by the database management system, which helps to reduce duplicate values by storing data in a structured or centralized manner. While coming to the traditional file system, the storing of data, we may not be in structured or may not be in any order. It may not contain any order. It may not follow any order. But coming to this, we are not storing the duplicate, or we are unable to remove the duplicate values. So for example, student details need to be stored repeatedly in different files, but here we have different constraints. Based on the constraint, we are able to remove the repeated values or duplicate values from the database. So data sharing, so this is one important concept in the DBMS, and one important feature which allows multiple users to access and use the same database. So at a time, multiple users can use the same database, or they can share at a time. So like for example, faculty and administrator can access student information from the same database. So at a time, multiple users, or like a faculty and administrator, they try to access the student information from the same database at a time. So this is a very important concept, where the data sharing concept is applicable in the database management system. Next, coming to the data concurrency, next feature is a data concurrency. Means multiple users can access or modify the database at the same time without causing incorrect results. So like before we have discussed, like the database can be accessed by multiple users. Here also we can modify the data. So whatever the data is there in the database can be modified at a time, so concurrently, without causing any incorrect results. Like multiple customers, for example, multiple customers can perform banking transactions simultaneously. As we are doing this step usually in banking concepts, so they perform different transactions day by day simultaneously. So this is one of the important feature for the DBMS, database management system. So next, coming to the next feature is the data searching, so which allows you to search and retrieve required data from the database. So for example, if I want the student details who secured more than 80 marks, so I can retrieve this data from the database by writing any query, by writing the database languages query. So I can retrieve the data fast, so I can search the data fast compared to traditional management system. Like next feature is the data security. So it protects the data, which allows you to protect the database from unauthorized access, so which controls the misuse of the data. So this is a main important feature which is provided by the database. Only authorized employees can access data. So there is a restriction for unauthorized persons. Next, data recovery, so which is very important concept in a database. Coming to this database, data recovery is the process of restoring the data, so after a system failure. For example, after any server crash, or for example, if I want to recover the data whatever has been failed, so by using the data recovery concept, we are able to recover the data from the database. So next, data consistency. Next important feature is the data consistency, so which means the data remains accurate, valid and uniform throughout the database. So for example, if I want to modify like a student phone number, so the student phone number I need to update with the new phone number. So by using this data consistency, the database should be available to modify this phone number from the database. So not only that, if I want to change any type of data from the database, by using this data consistency, it tries to insert the new data values from in the database. So these are the important features in the database management system. So next concept is data models. So what is a data model? So a data model is a collection of concepts used to describe the structure of a database, so which gives the relationship among the data and constraints on the data. So as we provide the data model with three important concepts, we are going to provide the structure, so the relationship between the data, whatever the relationships we are having between different types of data, and the constraints on the data, whatever the constraints are applicable for the data, so which helps us to understand how data is organized, stored and accessed in a database. So this is a main concept. So here the data models are classified into four types. The first one is relational data model, second one is semi-structured data model, next one is entity relationship model, or else we call it as a ER model. The fourth one is object oriented or object based data model. So first one, relational data model. So what is this relational model? So this is a model in a database in which the data is organized in the form of tables or relations. So we can say the table consists of rows and columns. So this we represent that as a relational database model, where the values are inserted in the form of rows and columns. It was proposed by E.F. Codd in 1970 and is most widely used data model in relational database. Usually, while inserting data in the database, we use this relational model. So, what are the main components in this relational model? So, the data is represented in the form of table. So, this is the table, or else we we say this table as a relation, which consists of particular data which is related with which in which the table consists of related data. So for example, so let us take this is a student data. So student table, for example, this is a student table where we are having the field names or attributes as student ID, student name and student place. So where we are going to insert the values of the particular student. So these are the this is a representation of a relational model, or this is a representation of a table. So where it consists of rows and columns. Here the rows we represent it with the rows. These we call it as a tuple. So and the columns we call it as an attributes, and these columns are represented as attributes or columns or fields. So in this we are having two important integrity constraints, like we are having the primary key and the foreign key. So primary key can be represented as a unique row, so unique column or unique column from in a particular table, a column or set of columns that uniquely identifies each row. For example, in a particular table, the primary key can be represented with these IDs or phone numbers. This comes under the primary key. So next, this is one of the integrity constraint. Whenever applicable, we apply on that particular database. So next, coming to this foreign key, a column that establishes between two tables. So whenever we apply a foreign key, there should be a relationship between these two tables. For example, I am taking student table and I am taking this is a library table, and this is a library table where the particular column in a primary table, or this is a parent table, we call it as a parent table, and this is a child table. So there should be relationship between these two tables. So this is a foreign key. This ID can be in the student ID can be in this library table, and this is library ID and library name. So the foreign key represents there should be some relationship between two tables, the primary table, I mean the parent table and the child table, so that we can perform certain operations by using these integrity constraints by applying primary key and foreign key. Next, coming to the second model, which is very important in order to represent data. So this is ER data model. So entity relationship model here represents an entity relationship model, which is a conceptual data model which is used to represent the structure in the form of entities, attributes and relationship. So here the important concepts we are having in this ER model is entities, attributes and there is a relationship. So for example, we can see here, so this is an example for ER model. So this is an example for ER model where we are having customer entity, account entity, and this is depositor is a relationship, and this customer having these IDs, customer ID, customer name, customer street, customer city. Account contains this account number, account balance, balance. So these are the fields of this account entity, and there is a relationship between a customer and account with the relationship depositor. Here we may represent this ER model with by using different types. So there can be a one-to-one or one-to-many. So there are different relationships, or there are different representations for ER model. This is an example for customer account depositor ER model. So next, third model. Coming to the third model, this is an object-based data model. So which represents data using objects and their relationship. An object contains both attributes, operations or methods, we call it as a methods, that can be performed on the data. It is mainly used to represent complex real world entities in a natural way. For example, a student object may contain, so let us consider a student as an object. It may contain attributes and methods. So where we may take any number of attributes such as the student ID, name, branch and marks. So these are the different types of attributes, where the methods related with the student object. So I have taken the methods like register method, calculate marks and display details. So this is a representation of object based data model, where we are having attributes and methods, where there is a relationship between these object, attributes and methods. Next model is, the fourth model is semi-structured data model. So where here the representation of data that does not follow a fixed or rigid structure. Like normally in traditional database model, we are having a table and where we are going to represent the values in the form of tables. Here we don't follow any structure. The data may have different fields or structures for different records. So like it uses tags, attributes, hierarchical structure to organize certain data. For example, we can take like XML, JSON and HTML. So these are the different types of languages where we are going to represent in different formats. Like XML and HTML, where we are going to use JSON, we are going to use in different representation. There is no fixed format to represent. Whatever the data, we can represent in different formats by using these programming languages. So next, this is an ER model and this is a relational model, where we are going to represent the values in the form of rows and columns. Here the attributes or the field names can be represented as customer ID, customer name. So these are the multiple rows and these are the values, which represents a relational model in the form of rows and columns. So the next concept is in database is instance and schema. So instance and schema. What is a schema? So schema represents, it's an overall description of the database, or else we can say schema in simpler form. It is a structure which represents the database. So how the structure of the database looks like. Example, we can take any type of real-time examples in order to represent the schema of a database. Like I have taken the college database, movie ticket database, for example, any library management database. So these can be taken as any database can be represented or can be represented with by using the schema. So next is, what is a instance? So how the instance can be defined? it is a collection of information stored at a particular time. So the instance can be changed timely. For example, so what is an instance in a database? For example, now whatever the data at present or at a particular moment, what is the data stored in a database represents an instance. For example, let us take the student database, which contains now the database contains like student details like 1 2. So this can be represented as a instance. So instances usually changes overly. So whenever there is an updation at that particular time, we call it as an instance. So for example, grades, salary, ticket pricing, at that particular instance, whatever the data is stored in the database can be represented as an instance. So we'll see the difference between schema and instance. So how the schema is defined? It is an overall description of the database, or else we can define schema with a structure of the database, overall structure of the database. And instance, it is a collection of information, whatever the data is stored in the database at that particular time. At that particular time, whatever the data stored in that, we call it as an instance. Schema is same for whole database. So whole database, the structure defines remains constant. However, in instance, the data in instance can be changed using deletion, updation, and whenever we are performing certain operations or certain alterations to the database, the instance may change. At that particular time, it remains constant, but the values in that particular, it will be changed. Does not change frequently. Usually schema, it remains static. It changes frequently. So defines the basic structure of the database and how the data will be stored in the database. So we already know the particular schema can be represented as a structure or overall description. So it is a set of information at a particular time. At a particular time, whatever the information we have in a database represents the instance concept. So this is a diagrammatic representation of a schema, how the schema representation will be. So here I have taken three entities, teacher and subject and department, where this can be represented. The teacher contains different attributes like teacher name, date of joining, subject code, and the subject contains multiple attributes or multiple values. So the department contains these fields. So this overall represents a particular schema or structure of a particular database. Here I have three types of entities: teacher, subject, and department, where there is a relationship between these three. So today we have discussed about database management system. So we have discussed different concepts related with database management system. So how we are going to store the values and different applications of database management system. So next, what are the different types of data models? So how data is represented in different models. So where we have seen this instance concept and schema concept, so which comes under the introduction part of the database management system. So thank you.